Welcome to the lounge. Oh, it's so good to be back. Lounge Lizards, I've missed you so much. I've got Todd Crapper. We're talking about Pandora, Total Destruction, which kickstarts the day this drops. So I'm dropping it the same day. It's amazing. Todd's amazing. It's amazing to be back. I've missed you all. I hope everybody's safe and healthy, and I love you. And this is a fantastic conversation. We talk about a lot of stuff, but we really, it's just, I don't know, it's just good to do this again, everybody. Just check it out. I'll talk to you later. So, so talking about, like, those paths that, like, you could have taken. I think it's a storyteller thing to, like, look back and, like, oh, I could have done this thing. And, like, you know, and then this would have happened and this would have happened. But then, like, if you're a real storyteller and you really want to, like tell every side of a story, then you're like, oh, yeah, but this bad thing could happen. Like, if I had, you know, continued to work to be a writer and written the great American novel when I was in college or just out of college, then maybe I would have been this, you know, this awesomely famous writer and everything. And, you know, there's a bunch of people in my life that I wouldn't have got to meet, you know. Maybe I wouldn't have had time to get into playing role-playing games the way I have. And I've met some of my favorite people in the world doing this hobby. Or maybe I would, you know, take up drinking or have a drug problem because I'd be rich and, you know, would be just out of college and stupid, you know. It's like you can extrapolate those variable stories.
Yeah, I think the thing about it, though, is, and for me, why role-playing games are so appealing is because my experience when I sit down to run something at the table, because that's my preference, is to GM. I will play a game, but I find it far more boring than being a GM, because it's like, wait, I'm going to play one character? Sure, I'll give this a shot. We'll see how long I can stay awake for it, you know. Can I, you know, do an Andy Kaufman thing where I play one character, but, you know, he actually has, like, you know, 2 to 4 different kind of voices or something that he used, you know, like in, you know, I mean, back then it was a very inappropriate multiple personality thing, but I get the idea. The intent was so that the actor could stretch his muscles, because playing one character, it was boring for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for me, it's very much that improvisation at the table. It's more about the initial reaction to what did happen. And it's very much, for me, a pass-fail kind of thing. So this whole idea of, like, you know, like the perfect story, you know, like the perfect twist, and, oh, if only it had been this or something like this. That's great when you're writing a novel, but once you're running a game, regardless of how much prep you put into it or don't put into it, once it actually happens at the table and it's become a visceral reaction by everybody at the table, including the GM, then that's what gives it its magic. That whole sense of, you know, like, wow, that happened exactly the way I wanted it to. Or it's just like, I had no idea that was going to happen, and that fucking rocked, you know, so that's why those kind of things, I don't think I've ever really walked away from a game and then later on said, oh, I should have done this. I think if anything, it's been more of like oh yeah, he was going to have, like, a bulldog that could grow to 50 feet tall and then stomp on buildings and all this other kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like, I forgot the bulldog, but you know what? That'll work out. I'll save the bulldog for later. That'll be a nice surprise.
Save it for later, yeah. Well, that's
the whole thing of just, like, you know, like, oh, crap, they should have gone left, because the left is where the awesome trap is. Well, as you go to the right, it turns out there's an awesome trap. Same thing here. You know, like, all your players really know is that visceral reaction that you gave them, or whether or not it sucked or whether or not it rocked, or somewhere in between. That can happen too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's on a continuum, you can alter that continuum as you go, and, you know, say, hey, this thing is here. And I've recently had a campaign that I'm bringing to a close, and there was like, here are the events I want to kind of have happen going in the closing, And then there were events that changed where that was going. And I decided, like, yeah, I'm going to pull that out. And it was like a flashback, where people were kind of playing other characters, but they would kind of be able to get into the actual villain's head. And like, I'm going to pull that out. It doesn't make sense to do. And then, we decided that, after this is done, I was going to run this other thing, and I got a date as to like when that was coming out. I'm like, well, I need like a couple more weeks. And I was like, well, then I'm putting the flashback back in. like of course, like I thought it was a cool idea before, and I think it's still kind of a fun, weird idea, and and it's like you can do that with games. You can make it modular and kind of play around with those parts when you're running games. I love running games too. I'm a big fan. But I don't, more and more I like running and playing games. Like I'm kind of evening out. Whereas I used to be I must game master. Now I'm less like, I kind of want to see what other people do, and and I like doing weird characters, just basically like universally when I play games. So I end up, just having fun voices and reacting to things in weird ways and stuff like that. And it just, I think it ups the fun for everybody. So.
Yeah. For me, I find game mastering, game mentoring, GMing to be, I'm very much opposed to the idea of there being two different types of people at the table, the game master and players.
Yeah.
For me, the game master is a player, and that really reflects on how I design things nowadays, in the sense of just like, I want to make something that the game master is going to find some mechanical stimulation in this, in the sense of just like, they're not just going to be able to, focus entirely on the story and what would this character say and what would they do and all this other kind of stuff, but to find ways to take the mechanical pieces that you've put into this game and how can I move this around in order to do something? It's almost like you want the GM to also be able to play catch or play chess. Play catch? What? That kind of reference is that? You want the GM to be able to play chess.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to just stand there and be the one that rings the bell when someone's turn is done. Like they're there to fucking play chess.
Right.
So that's how I look at it, and that's how I like to design everything. Is like the GM is a player with more responsibility, who says they're the keener at the front of the class, who is more than willing to do everyone else's homework for them, and there's just hand out copies. They're more than happy to do it because just doing their own work, it's not stimulating enough. This class is moving too slow. That's kind of my take on it. And I know in some ways it comes across as being a little kind of like, thinking that I'm better than other players, but it's just the way that I just like to do it. I just want that adrenaline rush of, fuck, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do,
Yeah.
Just give me the ground basis of, okay, this is how everything works. These are the options, the tools you have to play with. Now go somehow make a story out of that, through the eyes of all of these other characters and the setting and everything else like this. It's, for me, there's almost no greater rush, that is not going to involve going and performing in front of drunk people. Like for me, it's I have tried getting into improv, and I've done it for very short stints.
Uh-huh.
And then as soon as it involves, we got a venue in a small club, and if we're lucky, we'll get 6 people tonight. It was just like, I feel like I've brought shame onto myself. It's just like, whoa, what am I doing? Come on, And then I don't know. There's just something about the whole thing. I don't get that kind of, I don't feel like a dirty whore when I play role-playing games, like I would when I would play improv.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the fix. And now living in a rural area, there's no improv group around here. And if there is, I don't care what Mabel's take on this new character of, so this is just how I get the fix. It's with role-playing games. They're my improv.
I love that idea. I actually do improv.
Yeah,
In
well, I
fact,
know, and that was one of the things I knew. It was like I could totally segue the whole improv
yeah,
thing, and I know Doc's gonna get it.
yeah, I
Boom,
know
no problem.
totally. I will say this: I've told people that they're like, how do you still doing improv? Like you started doing it over 20 years ago, and they're like, how are you still doing improv? And I'm like, here's the secret: you take a 10-year break from doing improv. and just you get it started, you get that same group started, and you get a little bit of popularity, and then you have a huge argument and blowout where you don't talk to your best friends for like 10 years. And then you slowly start to talk to them again, and then they're like, hey, do you want to come back for one anniversary show? And you're like, yeah. And then you do that show, and they're like, hey, and then you have that John Wick moment of like, people have been asking me if I've been back. Well, yeah, I think I'm back, and
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It is fun that like the two things I kind of do well are very improv-y, and it basically means I think that I just don't adhere to a plan super great.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's weird too. It's before, when I used to do improv, before I really started to make the correlation between it and gaming, when I used to do improv solely as improv,
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was a release from having to follow so much structure. It was a way to just go, oh, I just want to stretch,
Yeah.
And, now it's this weird way, I don't know. I've had to make so many changes to just how I function and do things from a cognitive level,
Mm-hmm.
because like just over 10 years ago, I was involved in a nasty car accident. And one of the things I did was smash my head right into the inside windshield,
Oof.
which was my third concussion.
Oh.
And it took an effect. For the longest time, it was very difficult for me to be able to keep one clear, concise thought and everything else like this. And then to be able to concentrate when other things are going on in the background, that I've had to go through a process, a kind of self-taught process of neuroplasticity. The whole idea is just that, no, the brain is constantly adapting and evolving and healing and everything else like this. Don't just give up on your brain. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, it has really just changed now how I organize thoughts and information and how it comes to me and stuff like this, that I feel like it actually makes me better at improvising, because now I can keep track and remember the stuff that I need to. Like it's very rare for me to make notes when I'm running something and I'm completely improvising it.
Yeah.
If I write down anything, it's a name, because I'm terrible at remembering nouns. I haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
When I say that to people, they're like, wait, you mean like the names of somebody? I'm like,
No.
a person, place, or thing. If it's got a proper name and it's in the dictionary, I don't know it.
Yeah.
It's not there. It is a thing, and that's it until someone reminds me. But other than that, I'm just able to kind of keep this information. And it has very much come in handy with my freelance work, because I'm so diversified in the different things that I have going on, my own publishing company and the stuff that I'm working on. And then to just be able to, and even to other projects still in development, I can very much feel the filing cabinet inside and where exactly to go and look for this stuff, and then pull that up very quickly.
Yeah.
And I find that very much the table too. Like right now, because like in order to talk to you right now, I am sitting in my car in a parking lot behind the retail store that I work at, because I have to steal broadband internet that I don't have at home because of where we live. We live out in the country. It's just not available to us. Which means it's not very practical for gaming online. I'm not going to sit back here for 3 to 4 hours at a time every week.
That's fair.
So everything I do is play by post. I am currently running 2 games, including the Pandora one that you're part of.
Yeah.
And I have very much noticed that I feel like I'm on top of this. I think I've made 1 oops in the year since I've been, running play-by-post games. I made a point of keeping things that's important. I want to pin that, remember it later. But it's even got to the point where in the game of Ironbound that I'm running with my other play-by-post group, I've even said, hey, I'm going to set up a channel for each of you individually. And if you want to do a little solo scene where it's just like, I want to look a little further into like my character's relationship to this character, and we'll do a little solo scene. So in addition to the 2 main games, I've got 3 side plots that are running simultaneously. And it's like, bring it on. Like so I feel like my improving is better now because I'm not literally pulling things out of thin air. Now I'm actually able to look at everything and make those connections and then draw something from it, really quickly.
Yeah.
So I guess, I've said it quite a few times. I find myself saying thank you to the woman that almost killed me because it's actually kind of worked out in this bizarre way. It just meant that I had to go through 3 or 4 years of very painful rehabilitation, et cetera, et cetera. I, of course, don't want that to happen again. But at the same time, too, I feel like I'm a better person for it.
I've heard people say that with things that have happened before too. That like that it's funny, not funny, haha, but funny, weird, I guess. Yeah, yeah. Like sometimes these terrible events will happen, and it's like, there's when you come out of the other side. I mean, I can think of that in my life, like, the things that have happened and in dealing with them, I've learned something and I've, improved my life. So it's always interesting. I have a kind of ongoing thing with, like, whenever I get into arguments with people, I don't necessarily want to say on the political spectrum, but it's my show. I guess I can say that if I want to. Do it. When I get into arguments with people who are like, this is this way and this way and this way, and I'm like, what have you really ever suffered in your life? Like, have you ever really had to deal with anything really bad? And the answer is almost always no. And it's kind of like, and I don't want anybody to suffer. I don't want people I care about who happen to have a different political ideology from me to ever have to suffer. Because suffering sucks. But sometimes there's that moment of like, yeah, but if you had that, if you put a little callus on your soul, maybe you would kind of get to this point a little bit more, and I had to do it,
Yeah, and that's just it. Like it's making me think of this woman that I used to work with at a newspaper in Ottawa, and she was very much, like a wannabe princess, and the way, I'll admit we, had some laughs and we did make fun of her for very much one of her dream goals as an adult was to be a princess. And she was, very much, daddy's girl and everything else, very, very close to her father. She lost him very suddenly. Mm-hmm. And my understanding of it is that it was not a pretty thing. But then within the next year, all of a sudden I'm seeing Facebook posts of her getting a fucking job in Disney World where she is one of the fucking princesses, mm-hmm. Like where she's Cinderella or Snow White or whichever one it is. But it's like she always wanted to be a Disney princess. That was her lifelong goal. And that trauma motivated her to say, I'm going to do that. Whether or not I'm going to do that, like for my dad, I'm going to do that for me or whatever the case, where I'm going to show them, not show all them, But it was just like she went and she did it. And now I have like mad respect for what she did and feel like a complete heel. And as soon as I saw that picture, I said, like, holy crap, you did it. Like,
yes.
I'm so proud of you. Like, so good on you for that. And, I apologize for, making jokes at her expense and everything. Cause it's like, how many people will say something like that and everyone laughs at you and then you just keep going and you're just so persistent about it. And you see it with so many other people who come out of the closet, announce themselves as being trans or changing their pronoun, or just simply not, how they want to identify themselves. And then you look at the people who are poo-pooing on that kind of stuff and just be like, you wouldn't have the balls to even think about doing something like that. I have a brother-in-law whose real first name is Donald. His middle name is Scott. Everyone calls him Scott. If I suddenly start calling him Donald and start saying it's like, no, fuck you. That's on your birth certificate. You can't change how you were born.
Yeah.
This piece of paper says your name is Donald. Donald. That's not how it works. You know, like if he comes along and says like, no, I don't like Donald. I like to be called Scott. Done. No problem, Scott. You know, so like, because these are people that, yeah, I kind of agree. You know, they haven't gone through something and come out the other side and said, no, I still want to go through with this. This is something that I want to do. Because for me, I have this very unhealthy obsession with succeeding in the role-playing games industry.
Yeah.
To the point that if the rug comes out from under my feet and I'm suddenly falling down into the abyss of a volcano, it's going to hurt. Because that's, you know, like I've just set myself up in such a way that failure is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been 10 years going, and it's just like, I know the only reason why I have this motivation is because of what I went through.
Yeah.
And that sense of, wow, it could all go so quickly. And simply because I was driving home from a job that was okay, and yeah, it paid the bills.
Yeah.
And now as a result, I know that just lingers in the back of my head and keeps pushing me forward, you know?
Yeah. It's the hardships that I think that help to motivate us and keep us going. And, you know, it's easy to, that's the thing. It's easy to lay down, right? Like that's,
yeah.
You know, I guess I'm going to get real personal here. I've talked about this a little bit on my podcast, but my mom passed away in 2019, and the last movie that I went to see with her, when I was growing up, she instilled in me a kind of love of comic books, and that's where a lot of my love for superheroes and comic books comes from. And she loved the Marvel movies, and the last movie that we saw together was Endgame, and I watched that scene from Endgame where Captain America stands up and, you know, everybody shows up. But like, I watched that a lot when I was kind of dealing with everything with her passing and everything. And it just reminds me every time, like, no, you stand up, you know,
yeah.
you just, whether you want to or not, no matter what you're up against, you got to stand up.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So that got kind of intense there.
It's the only way to do it. It's an all or nothing kind of thing.
That's right.
Once again, the moment just headed in that direction, and we went with it. And look what happened now as a result. You know, that was something beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Hey? Oh, it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
I do have to say though, talking about your the stuff that you put out. So I had a chance to play High Plains Samurai when it was in playtesting, which I think was the first time I heard your name.
Well, it makes sense. I have a very distinct name. It's one of those things. It's very, you don't know where you heard it from, but it's just be like, there's this fucking guy out there called Todd Crapper. Can you believe this crap? Like, seriously, I've been asked if I changed my name to that or if that's my pseudonym, as if like, yes. I thought the best way to make a great first impression was to make you think of the thing that you sit on with your bare butt. You know,
It's like the witch from Men in Tights, Latrine. You know, oh, what shithouse? Yeah, you're like, yeah. But I mean, it is distinctive. Like, hey, that's.
Oh, it very much is. I know Mo Tusino once said to me once, just be like, you know, I love the fact is like you're the first one in the room to like dump on your name, unintended.
Yeah.
And he says like, and you own that. It's like, you know, you take that. You won't let anybody beat you to the punch, and no one, you know, in his words, comes out with like better puns than you do. And it is one of those things. Like growing up as a kid, who wouldn't speak up for himself and, you know, and let himself, you know, put up with an awful lot of other people's shit. You know, much like a crapper. See?
Yeah.
See how it works there? It's so fucking easy. But as I became an adult and started to actually get more confidence, like of just constantly being pushed down and getting myself back up and everything else like this, and then watching as these people, these punk ass kids, who were constantly dumping on, like on the family name, to a point sometimes it would make my mom cry. And then seeing them becoming an adult with these responsibilities, and they don't dare make any kind of jokes whatsoever about my name, no matter what the context of. And I love making them feel awkward of knowing it's funny, but you're not allowed to laugh at me because you're on the phone working at Visa calling me, like you've got to behave yourself. I'm going to take full advantage of this and make sure that you, that if you laugh out loud, you're going to feel like you're going to be taken into HR the next day kind of thing, So now I just revel in it. I went through a period of time where I used a pseudonym, The Warden, because I thought Crapper was too distracting. And it totally is. But then later on, it really kind of came down to this, like, well, what am I doing? Like, am I trying to avoid something, or am I actually trying to, is what I'm working on an extension of myself, or am I trying to, like, be somebody else when I do this and blah, blah, blah. And then it just came down to just own it, Yeah. It was just like, why run? Why hide from it? I've gone through an awful lot to have this name. I might as well keep it and wear it as a badge and just, watch somebody try and crack a joke about it.
There's something to be said for leading into your own, any quirks of personality. I mean, I'm always the first person to mention that I'm dyslexia, or I have dyslexia, and I'm dyscalculia, and like I'll bring that up. The thing I've said before is like, I have an inverse confusion range. So if something is very simple for most people, it will be very complex for me. But if it's very complex for most people, it'll be simple for me. So it kind of, it reverses itself. And one of my favorite moments, what I've actually talked about on here, is I was helping navigate through a park in the rain in Boston, never been there before. And I kind of like, they were describing like this thing, and I like thought I had found it. I'm like, follow me. And like, it was in the right direction. Like, how did you find it? I'm like, that's my secret. I'm always confused, or like, how did you find it? Like we were so confused. I'm like, that's my secret. I'm always confused. And like, that's, that's kind of the, like, and nobody's going to make fun of me for getting things wrong because I'm going to be the first,
Yeah.
That's and I think that's a thing that I picked up from comedy, but I also think it's a thing that you get from self-awareness, and even maturity to some extent.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think there's also some of that too. It's just like other people, have started to, they've got a little bit more kind of maturity on their own shoulders, so to speak, and just be like, I totally would have made fun of that guy as a kid. But now I watched the documentary and I get it, or I feel like I get it. Like, get it enough to shut the hell up,
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. But kind of going back to your work. So High Plains Samurai, which I absolutely loved. I've actually kind of wanted to play another game of it, but it's not the kind of game that I bring to my usual group. They're very much a Pathfinder group. So,
right.
And so that's fine. That is what it is.
Oh yeah.
But I've been kind of like looking through. I actually didn't really pay it. I'm gonna admit something. I didn't really pay tons of attention to Ironbound, because I tend to lean away sometimes from what I think is like fantasy stuff. But Ironbound is not fantasy stuff. I looked through it, or it's fantasy, but it's a very different kind of fantasy.
Yeah, we like to look at it, Danielle Delisle and I, the co-creator of Ironbound, Guardians of Navala, we like to look at it as fantasy with a purpose. And it's a very kind of jaded way of looking at things, because it goes with this impression that fantasy has no purpose. Hack and slash is just its own thing, which it's not. But the idea of, that there is one big main mission that is basically the cause behind everything. That there's no real, you're not just constantly fighting like, hordes of monsters that are just loosely pocketed all over the place, that everything has a rhyme, a reason, and a purpose behind it. And the whole idea of just like that there is this one main storyline that you're going to create that revolves around the idea that you are people called Navalans who are witches. You are Wiccans, pagans, like very much taking the idea of those traditions, whether or not you look at the modern ones, or if you want to take a look at, like the very traditional beliefs, before Rome took over, like the British Isles.
Mm-hmm.
And you wanted to apply that into, a culture that has existed and has, thrived as their own and has been left alone for millennia. And then all of a sudden these visitors come over from overseas and they have machines and a completely different way of doing things. But they're refugees because where they came from has, like basically been destroyed. They have no place to live. So you take them in. And then it turns out that they're actually stealing the magic from the very land that fuels you, that powers you, that you communicate with. And so that whole idea of everything that you do is based around this particular conflict. And that once that is somehow solved, or resolved, or however you want to look at it, then the story itself is done and everything returns back to peace.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I find with like a lot of hack and slash kind of fantasy, there's always going to be some new great evil that's arising,
Sure.
And it's always going to be, like, oh, what's this wizard doing over here? It's just like, oh, there goes the undead again. Pesky little buggers,
Yeah.
It's just like this kind of never-ending evolution of is like, so we're not going to have a dedicated force to deal with people like this. We're just going to constantly rely on these random strangers who just kill things with impunity. That's our solution. That's what we want to do. We want to hire murder hobos, and we're cool with this. That was the thing for me, that these are characters who know that there is a great struggle that's coming, that something must be aggressively done to deal with this problem, but aggression is not necessarily part of their beliefs. Yeah. And yet they've been, so, with what Danny and I are doing with Ironbound is basically having characters that need to take on the role of a fantasy warrior, but we're not born to be fantasy warriors. They have not really trained to be fantasy warriors. They are healers. They are oracles. They are elders. They are scouts. And these are people that have to find a way to use those skills to take on a force that can, that has no problem whatsoever, literally steamrolling over a village to get what they want. So yeah, that's why we like the idea of having it as like fantasy with a purpose, as we call it.
It's in instilling that purpose into your game is such an amazing way to change that dynamic. I can remember when shortly after third edition came out, Fantasy Flight came out with Midnight.
Yes.
And it was evil had won. And, so like, what do you do? Like, and it was a struggle. Like we played in and my group played in a campaign of it, and it was such an interesting way to do it. And, I can remember, the game master we had was really, really good. My character was a monk, but he had this bloodline that he was like, he came from kings. And so, that was always kind of like, oh no, you're kingly, you want to help these people, but sometimes you can't. Oh, this, and it's a really cool thing to have, to put that in there. And it goes beyond like, oh, how much gold are you going to pay us to go clear out that dungeon? Because it's like, the stakes for these characters feels real. It's an emotional thing. It's a oh no, I have this sense of duty, or my people will die if we fail at this. And I love that idea.
And it's one of the things that we started everything off with being part of Third Eye Games' Pip World system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their community content program. And so we have put some things out there that use the Pip system as is. But what we're really doing, our super plan behind the scenes, that curtain you're not supposed to go behind, is to take the PIP system and we're expanding on it so that it's not entirely skill-based. So that your characters can have their personal motivations, even to silly little quirks. It's just like, my character can just automatically know how many beans are in a jar. That's got to come in handy sooner or later.
Yeah.
Boom, that's a quirk, and you get some dice for it. If you can describe how that would apply, you will get dice for that. And we wanted to put all those things in there because, we want those to be a factor, because there are times where, I'm not really good at investigating. I've never had to investigate things before, and now I have to make an investigation rule. Well, what if there was a stake on the line that was really important to my character, that it warranted me spending points to put dice on it? Go for it. Use that. When Danny and I took the current draft of the mechanics for that version of the game, we each made a character, and she made a character that was very skill heavy, and I made a character that was very personality heavy. It's like I had some skills, but most of my dice all went towards motivations, quirks, and all that other kind of stuff. And they hold up fairly equally well. It always depends on the situation, but it's like that with any game.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, because the thing about, Wicca and paganism is that there's no one way of doing things. There are some shared practices, as my understanding of it, because I'm not Wiccan. I don't identify as a witch. I'm not pagan. I guess I'm agnostic. I'm the guy who just wants to make sure I've got a couple of apology notes under my pillow when I die. So there's no one way of doing things. And so the idea of having this preset pathway to determine how your characters are made and how they accomplish things seemed to be going against the very thing that we were trying to simulate. And that's one of the great things about working on this game for me, is that this is my first real true partnership on creating something. Danny is a witch. She's Wiccan.
Oh, cool.
And she is the one who is she is 100% charge of the setting. The setting is hers. She makes all those calls. My job is to then turn it into a game and make it playable. And it's great because, there have been so many things I can just, I have somebody that I can ask questions to, and I don't have to go and do research and hope that I was moving in the right direction, because there can be so much misinformation if you don't know exactly what to look for. If you don't have a guide, you could really be doing more harm than good. And what I love about it is, whenever she reads something that I've worked on, or I've explained how I want it to go, and when she says like, "Oh, that's very Wiccan," I'm like, "Perfect, I'm getting it." And it's been surprising how much what I thought was misinformation was actually, no, you're on the right path. A lot of times it's really about the intent of what you want to do with those kinds of things. I mean, if you look at it as, it's like with any, the problem with the stereotype is that a lot of stereotypes come from very misinformed, negative attribute that other people have placed on them. And like one of the big things, the idea of witches is that they're Satanists. It's like, no, that's different. That's a very, very different thing. Like, Wiccans, witches, modern day witches, and I believe the same thing would apply, like in the past, but do not quote me on that because I am not the expert.
Sure.
But modern day witches, they are all about nature. And these are ways that they like to communicate with nature and with themselves. It is how they look at the world and how they express themselves. And they do it in their own unique way. And just, it's just been really rewarding to just kind of be like, so if you don't look at it as just like, okay, so eating children is not a thing that they do. It never has been a thing that they do. But at the same time, too, the whole idea of them standing around in this circle doing incantations and all this kind of stuff, yes, take that, but use it in a positive light. It's just been very fascinating to me of just how easy it has been for me to understand this and then being able to express it mechanically in the form of a game, for other people, to then take it and to then do something with
it. And so you've had that learning experience as well as being able to to have that creative experience of putting numbers to it, basically, is
Yeah, in a sense. How do I want the physics of this world to work?
yeah.
Or I guess even a better way of doing it is just like, how do I want the story to be able to develop? How do I want the players to be able to access and manipulate the story through these characters, through the information that they write down on this piece of paper that we give them. And that's the part that I find just really fascinating in general, is how to take these really abstract principles and force a story out of it in a way that's not even forcing the story, that it just flows. Or you give it to the right people and they can just, they make music with it. And it's just absolutely fascinating because it's so difficult to explain it to someone else unless they totally get it.
Right.
Like, I have a very good feeling you know exactly what I'm talking about. If I explain this to other members of my family, except maybe my wife, so, but explaining it to my parents and aunts and uncles and stuff like this, there are very much confused looks that I'm worried they're having a stroke as I explain it to them. I don't think it's worth their health. I need to try to explain these things to them. I just need to say something, and then if someone nods their head, it's like, I totally get that. Just be like, we're in sync, and boom.
I mean, explaining tabletop gaming to like a lot of my extended family is like, their eyes kind of glaze over. Like, okay, cool.
You know what? I have to give Big Bang Theory credit, because once that show came out, and I always did enjoy that show. I always got a big kick out of that show.
Mm-hmm.
But when my in-laws started watching that show, then they started to understand, Dungeons and Dragons, that's the thing you do, like they do on Big Bang Theory. Yes, that's exactly how it is. And I was like, I get it now, kind of thing. Well, you don't, but thank you, for trying, thank you for humoring me at the very least, and realizing, see, we're not in a sewer, we're actually sitting at a table like ordinary people. And look at this, like they're not getting blazingly drunk, they're not getting arrested because they're trying to drive home, and this good stuff,
Yeah, and it's just connecting those neurons a little bit. The episodes of Community that did D&D, I think, were like, that's exactly what you're doing, like that, but just maybe not exactly, but it's on the right.
Yeah, I think they're doing it.
I think the popularity of shows like the Adventure Zone and Critical Role and stuff have really served to. I mean, I know so many people that have come to me and said, like you're doing like Critical Role type stuff. I'm like, that is the way closer to what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it very much has opened it up. There's, as much as I love the idea of this hobby potentially hitting, like a major milestone, like the whole fact that they're now a division of Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, I mean, and the fact that it's just like, we are potentially looking at the fact that this industry actually might be worth a couple of billion rather than a couple of 100,000, like that's a big deal. And, so the idea of that kind of legitimacy, at the same time, too, I'm a little hesitant about it because, I started playing in the Satanic Panic, and there was very much this kind of comfort zone of, we were very silently rebelling against authority.
Yeah.
Even though we were actually having fun with it, it just had the added perk of rebelling against authority in a way that nobody thought was ever rebelling against authority. It was like the safest thing that really quiet, timid people could do, to fight the man, So I don't know, when someone comes to me and, they clearly look like they have a lot of friends, that they could go out to any kind of public setting and get whatever member of the opposite or same sex that they want, and then they come along and say I love playing D&D and stuff like this. I've been playing for 20 years. I literally have the sense of just like, cool, where's the microphone, Narc? Because at no point in time do I believe any of this. But, that's the beauty of it, is just that it turns out that there were more people like us all along. We were just, I guess, like in the 80s and 90s, which is when I got into it, we were just so far into our geekdom, I guess we either didn't give a crap, or we're at that point where, well, we're definitely not going to be popular, so let's just do what we want to do anyway, and be interesting people.
Yeah, and
then it turns out everyone else was jealous of us. It's just like, look at that, they're reading comic books over there. They can just read them out in the open.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
Nerds!
Yep.
So,
no, that's exactly it.
I still don't quite trust it. It still kind of seems, I mean, like, from a business standpoint, as a publisher, bring it on.
Yeah.
The more people, the merrier. Let's diversify, get more voices out there and stuff like this. I mean, like, the game that's kickstarting as we're talking, Coyote and Crow, it's just like, oh, I love that whole idea of that thing doing, like, so phenomenally well.
Oh, me too.
And stuff like that, bring it on. But then there's still that reflex of just like, no, it's getting too popular. This doesn't seem right, so I'm still on the fence. I don't know where I really truly sit when it comes to this potential level of expansion that we're looking at.
It is kind of, it's a little bit terrifying to see, like, oh wait, is this thing that's kind of underground that I love, is it just going to become homogenized and
yeah.
And I mean, like, I don't know if you watched the Tales from the Loop series on Amazon.
No, I didn't. I heard about it, but no, I never saw it.
It was, so they ended up making it like an anthology, and I feel like they really missed the boat to actually take the continuum elements of a game and kind of make it a cohesive story. But I guess they wanted to avoid doing, another version of Stranger Things or whatever.
Yeah. It's a completely different medium. Like, it's the same reason why trying to do a direct translation of a book into a movie doesn't work 99 times out of 100.
Yeah.
Because it's a completely different medium. There's so many different functions and format and restrictions and availabilities that you're making something for a different audience, even if some of that audience, engulfed the original material.
Right.
So trying to make a TV show based on a role-playing game be like a role-playing game is, I feel like, dooming yourself to failure.
Yeah.
Versus, well, what is it that is the real spirit about this game? What is the main thing about it? And like when the D&D movie that came out in 2000, one of the ways that it really dropped the ball was it made it all about, the one character.
Yeah.
Who had sidekicks. They weren't part of a party. They had sidekicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, the idea was a fantasy setting, we're going to call it D&D. I think it was a test run basically for Lord of the Rings. Like, let's get another fantasy film out there, put it on the market, see what the initial response is, and then we can tailor our marketing accordingly when we put out Lord of the Rings, where we clearly give a shit about that one more than the D&D movie,
And that was more of an ensemble, grouping, like that, and it was way more interesting. And that D&D, that first D&D movie, had it been more of an ensemble instead of hey, you're my best friend, so your character is going to be the important one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I will say one of the translation things that comes up a lot is I love superheroes. I grew up, I've already talked about that a little bit. And superheroes never translate well to games, I don't think, because I think people look at superheroes as like, oh, the interesting thing about Spider-Man is that he has spider powers. Yeah. But that, if you read the comics and you understand the comics, that's not the interesting thing about Spider-Man. The interesting thing about Spider-Man is that he's a young guy who is struggling to kind of address all these other things in his life and feel responsible for everything. And like that is that's why that character is interesting, and he could have any powers. Like, you can have him, I don't know. Like, I've always kind of joked that the character of Nova, the human rocket, is Spider-Man. It's just they have different powers, but otherwise they're basically the same characters. And I think that we're seeing more superhero games that are leaning in that direction. We're seeing Masks, which, doesn't really matter what your powers are. I know I've played a bunch of them, but also I would like to point out one specifically that kind of addresses that in a very different way, which is Pandora: Total Destruction.
Oh, do we really have to talk about this? I mean, I've got the Kickstarter that's going to be launching in a couple of days. It's just been consuming. I thought we were just going to chill and hang out. All right, fine. If you want to talk about this project that I'm trying to raise money for, using a medium that people use for marketing purposes, fine. Let's go down this road.
I thought that was a pretty good seg overall.
Yeah. No, let's do it. Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, for me, the idea for Pandora: Total Destruction, which is the whole game is about overpowered super characters trying to control their powers just enough to overcome a great evil. And it struck me, and I remember too being at Breakout Con 2, maybe 3 years ago, and actually having breakfast with quite a bit of like the MMP crew at the time, and the Buffalo crew and everything coming down. Yeah. And I have a feeling that you were at the table too, because it was before Endgame. It was shortly after Infinity Wars, before Endgame came out. So one half of the table was speculating about what was actually going to happen.
Oh yeah.
And then the other half of the table, we were just talking about the comic genre in general, and I was saying, is like, what thing really bugs me just in general? I said, like, the training sequences for these kind of things. Like, the way that they expect superpowered characters to learn their powers is, like, well, just practice. Well, just like, motherfucker, I shoot eye beams out of my eyes. I'll kill you if I look at you. And you want me to practice? Okie dokie then, I'll practice, like, hey, my name is Rogue, and I will, like, suck you dry if I, like, so much as touch you, so I'm just going to practice. I'm going to search my feelings. Yeah. I'm going to center my emotion, and I'm just going to, my mentor is going to say a key phrase that will just loop in my head, and then I'll just do it. And from there, I started to think, well, can I make a game that will do something like that, where you start with powers that are dangerously out of control?
Yeah.
And over the course of a story, over the course of 3 acts, you harness it just enough that it's a little bit more reliable. And doing so, it really explores the whole idea is like, what actually makes somebody heroic? Is the fact that they have this great, amazing power? Like, is Superman a hero because he has these amazing powers? Or is it what he does with those powers? Or is it the fact that he does it? Come hell or high water. And even though it comes with sacrifices of a personal life and everything else like this, it still does it because for them, that's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that I found was just this interesting thing that once I was able to figure out how to mechanically I wanted to pull this off, then it was like, oh yeah, so you get to have rampant destruction, but with like kind of like a heart of darkness, where it's just like, oh, damn, I just blew out the side of that building. Oh, I hear people inside. Oh, crap, I did that. That's not the supervillain. What am I going to do about it? Yeah. And that's really what Pandora is about, which is not going to be a game for everybody, but yeah, I find, personally speaking, it's a more interesting look at the superhero genre of, let's take a look at people that don't have their shit together.
Yeah.
And put them in a situation where they got to get their shit together and they got to do it pretty fast.
It is funny to think of, like, you mentioned Rogue, and it's like, I feel like Professor X's advice for her was always like, learn to control your powers. You must learn control. And it's like, if he was a football coach, would he be like, you should score more points to win the game?
Like, good call, coach. Thanks, coach.
Thanks.
I would totally score more points.
Oh, is that how we?
Yeah. You know, and I get it. Like, no one wants to watch a movie where it's just like, you know, you just, or, you know, read an entire issue of, you know, like someone practicing, you know, like the same maneuver over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I get that. Cinematically, it doesn't mean anything, but it still kind of feels like this missed opportunity of, you know, watching them struggle and overcome and how they overcome it and this kind of stuff. And even then, too, the whole idea of just like, it's not going to be right. It's not going to be perfect. Like, in order for Pandora to work, I knew it had to be something where it's possible for you to gain total control over your power.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's not going to be interesting. It also requires a lot of luck and a lot of fortune, you know. So basically, in order to do it, because in the game, at the beginning of each act, every player involved rolls a d6s to determine how many scenes that they get to create in that act. You have to roll a 6 each time. So all 3 acts, you have to roll a 6. And then you would have to use all your scenes to have training scenes, always be able to meet the goal of that training scene, have enough hero points that you can afford to drop things down. You know what I mean? Like, it is possible. It is not very likely that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you know, that it's always that goal. But I know I needed to let people know. So like, your goal is not to be perfect. Your goal is to actually be imperfect, just less imperfect by the end than you were at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and then find a way to deal with things from there. You know, which would also require working together. You know, that whole sense of forcing it to a team. I've become very fascinated with alternative ways to, you know, provide teamwork in a game that isn't just like well, since you're helping, you know, that's a +1 bonus. You know, with now I like to look at other ways, just like, you know, well, how could you force them to do something to work together without actually forcing them to work together? You know, kind of thing like that. I just it's a thing I'm starting to become fascinated with.
Well, and in that way too, you know, it's a way more. It's one of those things that, you know, I've always maintained that the superhero genre in general can be broken down into these like elemental components that each of which have something interesting about it. And the idea of learning to control powers is just a really cool, interesting thing, because who hasn't had to learn how to do something? You know, like who hasn't, you know, learned how to, you know, play guitar or you know, something it takes practice and everything. Now imagine that if you didn't play guitar properly, that, you know, the house would explode. Like that's you know, I think that's the journey there is the story, which is, you know, awesome. It's not necessarily even the end game. It's been very fun to play. I'm very much enjoying it.
Cool.
I did get to introduce the weirdest idea I've ever come up with for a superhero, but
well, now you got to explain it. You can't leave your audience hanging.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So, I actually had this idea about 3 weeks before I saw that you were looking to run this, and I started a timeline, but it's meant to be a publishing timeline for a character named Tachyon. It was a word that was invented in 1967, and if just a few years ago, it was kind of like, we don't know if the tachyons are a real thing. And that's why I liked it. It's like a thing that only kind of existed for a short period of time. But in the timeline of publishers, I basically have it that like this publisher's like, hey, this word is cool, make a character name that. And so somebody did and didn't know what it was. And then they, you know, that book of business or whatever got bought by another publisher, and they're like, what is this character? And they introduce a new version of that character. And like, so everybody who's publishing it is like introducing their versions. And then somebody's like, oh, I've been a fan of all these versions of the character. They're all the real version, but they're part of the same. And it's like, it gets just more and more complex every time somebody else gets another writer gets their hands on it.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to play, and I was like, I want to play that character who just has no idea who they are, really, but also kind of like has this experience, but can't really draw on it and everything like that. And then you were playing this game, and I'm like, oh my God, can I do this thing? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, fuck, that's great.
I remember saying it's like, as long as you feel that you can describe how this power would create things like collateral damage.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like, what I love about this particular game is that no one has approached this with a typical power. Yeah. Where it's just been like, oh yeah, I've got super strength, and obviously I cannot control it. You know, it's just like, well, actually, I can draw all metal to me within like a 500-foot radius.
Yeah.
And but I can't quite control it, which means that I cause buildings to collapse and cars to, like literally like, crunch into tiny balls and all this other kind of stuff. You know, everyone's power is just like, man, yeah, you guys need to be locked up on an island and kept away from people.
I know,
which is exactly what happened. Yeah, all 5 characters just were like, no, you're on an island. And the island is, the island that's used in Inception and also in a James Bond movie where it's like this deserted. It looks like a full city, but it's completely deserted. And it's just like blow stuff up on the side, and then when the time comes and there's an actual battle, then we're going to have, people in the way and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like those are 5 characters that right away was just like, yes, they should not be near civilization ever. Like the one guy, he's the oldest character in the group. Yeah. And he has a thing that he calls dusting, which basically he just, I don't quite have it right, but he basically just causes like, the electrons and particles to basically just, release their grip, and then just things turn into dust. And then they're gone. It's just like, that's terrifying, and that's what I love about it.
Covalent bonds, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And now the idea, because right now, like those 5 characters are sitting in a cafeteria, just kind of hanging out, just talking about how the food sucks there. And it's just like these are 5 of potentially the most dangerous people in the world.
Yeah.
Just sitting around bitching about how there's no Wi-Fi on campus.
It is my wife has this quote that she said to me real early on in our relationship, which probably is why I was like, oh yeah, no, I want to be with her for a long time. Which is, I love it when the mundane is fantastic and when the fantastic is mundane. And,
nice.
That's exactly it. These 5 people who are insanely powerful, like, yeah, pizza day's okay, but the rest of the time you don't want to have the cafeteria food.
Yeah.
It's a really fun game. Now you're launching 3 days from when we're recording, which I believe I will maybe edit this if I remember. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, this will go out on the day
nice.
the launches. So let's talk about I know you're sick of talking about it.
Yeah, I've worked in marketing before, and I still work in marketing. Hi, Aloy. But it's one of those things where I'm very much an anti-marketing marketer.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, that's what everyone else is doing. Boring. Suck. It's manipulated. All this other kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's very much a case of like, yeah, I don't know. I just always kind of look at it just like, I'm also too very much a media whore in the sense of just like, I will take any opportunity to be interviewed, to talk about my stuff, to hear my name being mentioned on something. Half the reason why I'm constantly writing stuff into the Gaming and BS podcast is because I know they're going to read it and then they're going to say my name. And then I just get this kind of euphoric rush of just like, people I've never met know me, So yeah, it's this kind of odd line that I walk with. It's just like, I dislike the attention, but at the same time too, I fucking love it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But, no, by all means, I mean, it is one of the responsible thing for me to do as a business owner, is to, plug the thing that I'm looking to make some money on. So yes, let's talk about the Kickstarter.
Yes. Let's see, 30 days?
24 days, actually.
24 days.
I have found that a 4-week campaign, there's that middle period where people are changing their mind for one reason or another. And I've actually because I've run a few Kickstarter campaigns for myself, and I've run some for some other clients. And I've actually crunched out the numbers, and I've shown very little difference. Like, if you were to eliminate the third week in a campaign, it really doesn't make any kind of detrimental difference that you're not going to hit that stretch goal, marker, or even just like, the baseline at all. So for a little while, I've just kind of made it a 3-week campaign, or just not a full 30 days. And it just kind of takes a little bit of the stress out of just, you're not having that week of watching as many people suddenly say, I saw something else, and then off they go. Or just like, I didn't get paid this week. And then they do something else, So yeah, it's 24 days is what I will be running this one for.
Okay. Awesome. And it's gonna, the basic book, tell us about the end product.
So the idea is that it's going to create a 96-page core rulebook for Pandora Total Destruction. That's going to be as a digital PDF. There will be an EPUB, and then any print copies will all be done print on demand through DriveThruRPG. Just because with things going on in shipping and printing and everything else like this, I think it's easier for everybody to just not have to concern ourselves with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if things get to some kind of ridiculous level that I really, really want, but know is not going to happen, sure, offset print runs and, strike a deal up with Indie Press Revolution and everything else like this. Sure. But a really big, important thing for my work with Broken Ruler Games, my company, is the cover price. It is one of the things where games can be ridiculously expensive. And so my goal was to find a way to make this as affordable and achievable as possible, without having to compromise and just be like, well, I can put out a small core rule book and then I'll just work on supplements that'll fill in. This is one where it's like, nope, 96 pages to do it. Anything else that's going to come out as a result, like with the stretch goals, are going to be the Pandora Academies that are going to be created by these other authors that I've been so lucky to bring on board. And, because the story takes place, it's centered around the Pandora Academy, which is where you go to learn how to use these powers. Sometimes it's a school, sometimes it's a prison, other times it's anywhere in between. And so I've got Aloy Lasanta is going to be writing a stretch goal. I've got Stephanie Bryant. They did Threadbare. They're going to be doing a stretch goal. Alistair Guzman, who also did one called The Maze, which is like the title alone, because I'm a sucker for mazes, and there's this 300-page tome, and just like, So he's going to be doing a Pandora Academy as well. I've got Brandon K. Atten, I think is how you say his last name. I think if anyone can butcher someone's last name, it's going to be me, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, he's the one behind Never Going Home, which got quite a few accolades recently. He's going to be doing a stretch goal. And Brendan Bishop is also going to be doing one as well. Nice. That's the extent of how much further. I'm not looking at supplements, to do a bunch of, add-ons with it. This 96-page book is going to be what you need to do everything that you need to do. There are a couple of stretch goals that have alternate versions of the game, because this was not the first way that I planned on running it. So I have a version that I originally made that involves a dice pool, roll a shit ton of dice and add them up and this kind of stuff. But it's not practical for everybody. And then I'm also working on a solo play edition. That's a stretch goal too. So yeah, I mean, the idea is to keep it, to get a copy it's $13 Canadian, which should come to about $10 American, give or take. And then there's other stretch goals for just like the little extra kind of perks, like exclusive kind of stuff. But yeah, I like to keep all my stuff as affordable as possible. Being somebody that is basically on the low income side of the scale, I very much appreciate not having to pay $50 just to get a hold of a book. Just to say that I'm going to put a book in a box for you, I need $50 up front. Then we're going to let you know how much the box and gasoline is going to cost to send it to you. For Christmas, my wife bought a copy of, I wrote something for Earth Dawn 4th edition. Earth Dawn is a setting I've just loved since I was in my 20s. And I got to write something for them. But I didn't really order a hard copy of the book because I knew it was going to be pricey. She went ahead and she did that as my Christmas present. I ended up seeing how much it cost. It ended up costing just over $108 Canadian.
Holy crap.
To make the fucking thing and then to send the fucking thing.
Jeez.
Now, I love the fact that I have that because that's something now that anytime that I have imposter syndrome, I can look at that and say, like, look at that. My name is in this book. That's a thing. You know, like if 25 years ago, if I knew that my name was going to be in one of these books, you know, I would have said, you're joking.
Yeah.
And then I would have gotten to this huge discussion with myself. And then, you know, then it would have just been a thing. But, you know, it's not a $108 book, you know, but that's what it takes to make that book, you know. And so that's why it's an important goal for me. For me, accessibility in multiple forms is very important to me. And I find keeping something at a very low price point, while still being able to pay my writers like 10 cents a word Canadian and that kind of stuff, you know, like still paying them, you know, like very decent, you know, rates and wages and this kind of stuff. That's very important for me.
The other thing I want to point out is the art is amazing.
Oh, yes. So all of the art that I have at this point was all, I mean, it's basically stock art from a person who I've never yet had a chance to actually meet online or even be able to receive an email back from or anything just yet. And so I hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly, but Tithi Luatfong. Their work is amazing. And the cover is actually 3 different pieces that I've merged together into a single piece. Because there wasn't any one piece that was quite doing the trick, but it was just like, but if I could get this person standing in front of that robot, you know, but instead of in the middle of the Arctic, you know, put them in the middle of like this ruined out city, building, and it's like boom, 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 and then done. But there's just so many other pieces that right away it just defined the look and the tone and everything. It's what sealed the deal. Once I knew that I could have that cover, that was a potential, everything else just opened up from there. Yeah. This is definitely the most art extensive book that I've made to date. I've always been a little light on the artwork, and I know art really helps to move copies. So that's why I'm just really lucky. And I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to, because everything I have of Tithi's is stock art, you know, so other people can get it. But I'm really hoping that I'll be able to work with Tithi to make some original stuff. And if not, I have a couple of others, you know, who are more than able to still provide a little bit of kind of variety. You know, I was a little concerned that if, you know, have one artist doing all the pieces kind of creates a very firm look of this is how the game is supposed to look, just so you know. Whereas if you have a little bit of flexibility of say like, or you could go with something that's a little bit more kind of this style or something a little more this style. It doesn't all have to be like, you know, dark and everyone's in shadows, slouched shoulders and all this other kind of stuff. You know, you can have a character in costume when you're playing PDT. But to make that initial sale in people's eyes when they see this, I wanted it to be where it's like, clearly something very destructive is going on. Clearly something very dire is going on. The person who is trying to stop it is not wearing a costume. Yeah. And the person trying to stop it clearly looks like they can handle themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, just that cover, it just did it. It just sealed it right then and there.
It's so good, and the interior art that you have too is like it's just are they all kind of composited from different drawings?
No, everything else in the interior art, they are as is.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was just for the cover that I did that, but yeah, everything else, there was like so many other great pieces, in TT's catalog that were just like, yep, this totally, makes that point.
Yeah.
But it also got to the point where it's like, well, I don't want to have just all stock art going all the way through this. I clearly, have some very specific imagery that I'd like to include,
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the Kickstarter comes in.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, that's fantastic. I if you had said to me that, oh yeah, TT's an artist that I found that, I had to do art for this, I would have been like, oh yeah, of course. So it looks like it's just, I don't know, it's really great. It's really great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm very happy with the whole thing and just how all this kind of stuff has come together. Even to the other day, like after, reading, someone had asked a question about the mechanics of PDT in our game.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember driving home later on that night and was just thinking, it's like, what if I changed the target number?
Mm-hmm.
Like the base target number, stuff like this. And it led me down like this probability wormhole where I was just rolling numbers, rolling dice and just be like writing down the results and just, okay, and then that would turn into this much havoc and, okay, but then what if it was this target number? Because the way that the game works is, explain to everyone else.
Sure.
And who knows, maybe I'm explaining to you. I don't know. We haven't really rolled dice too much.
That's true. That's true.
And when you roll dice so far, actually, Tachyon, we've been able to play it off as, well, Tachyon's just coming to this timeline and still a little confused. So you've only been rolling like a 2 and 3 so far the whole way through.
Oh, yeah, it has been great.
Yeah. But the way that it works basically is that anytime you go to do anything where there's a possibility of success or failure, you're going to roll your dice. You're going to roll the action dice, and it's going to be either conflict, interaction, or protection. And the target number always starts at 6. We are currently trying it out at 5 because we're playtesting.
Yeah.
And I'm very much starting to lean towards making 5 as the default. The more I work it out. But you start with the target number. Your character has personal values that define them. Each applicable value to the action drops the target number down. So on its own, without getting your powers involved, your values make things easier because they're what motivate you, what drive you, and they actually are what help with your success. The problem is that when you start getting your power involved, is that adds an additional die to the roll. Mm-hmm. And when PDT starts, that die is a D12. Your target number defaults to a 6.
Yeah.
So there's a very good chance that you will roll high in the beginning. And then what it does is that basically, if you using your power and you roll over the target number, you are going to cause havoc, which are basically, points that you get based on how much over the target number that you roll. And those points have to be spent to cause collateral damage to your immediate surroundings. You can use them to cause harm to your character. And in fact, it's the only way your character can take harm is through havoc. Mm-hmm. It's not something where it's like the villain can just target you with an I-beam. It's not that easy. They totally will, and they have no problem taking out the building behind you. Mm-hmm. So they will really cause havoc. But there's other things too, and it can even get so bad as you can have a power that goes so wildly out of control that it results in you taking on what's called a manifestation. So if you have the ability to throw fireballs from your hands, your power goes so wildly out of control that you can now manifest it so that you are now completely engulfed in flames, mm-hmm. And that can give you like an enhancement to your current power, or it can give you an immunity, that kind of thing. So it can just go wild and off the rails in so many ways. The goal to it is that you actually want to hit the mid-range. Yeah. You roll too low, and then it's not going to work, and you're going to take a complication. You roll too high, and you're going to cause havoc. In either of those cases, your action will fail. You will not succeed at what you need to do. And now you've got this new mess that is now piled on top of the current scene. You want to get that mid-range where it's like, there's a little bit of collateral damage, but it's an acceptable amount of collateral damage.
Right.
Under the circumstances, we can live with that.
Yeah.
You know? And there are ways that you can say, you know what, that's too much. Right now, at this point in time, I can't take it. I'm going to let the roll fail. I'm going to take that hit. And those are the kind of sacrifices that you have to make as the player and as your character in order to stay heroic.
Mm-hmm.
To say, no, I could totally hit that villain with my power and knock him down a step or actually end this fight. But the only way that I can do that is to also include the bus shelter over there where those people are hiding out. And I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. I can't bring myself to do that. So I'm going to have the roll fail. And those kind of sacrifices that you make where you choose to fail are ways that you can gain hero points, you know, like things that you can then start to apply because you start to feel empowered. Like, I'm doing the right thing. I feel like I'm getting control of the situation, that kind of stuff. So knowing that the game can mechanically back that up, you know, and no matter how many times I've tried to rework and crunch the numbers, and even then it's just like, fuck, it's even better than I thought. Holy crap. You know? And once again, it's this thing where it's like, the only reason why I was able to make this game was because of the accident. The neuroplasticity that I've gone through, I can actually visualize the things in my head in the sense whereas I can actually see it and do the whole Tony Stark thing where I just start moving things around and manipulating it visually. And then I just all of a sudden come up with the conclusion of what I need to do. And, you know, like it's just been this really great new way for me to be able to look at things from a different light, you know, where I literally feel like I can kind of create this symbol in my head that represents a certain kind of mechanic and then turn it around 360 degrees and say, you know what, from up here, it kind of looks more like, you know, a pillar, you know, whatever, you know, however. It's a really hard thing to explain, but seeing that the math backs it up has been like, neat. You know, and it's been very rewarding. And now it's also now shown that it's like, oh, okay. And you can make stories with it and have interesting characters, you know, and it's just like there. And, you know, there's been a couple of times where I've just been able to just kind of leave the room and you guys are just kind of going.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. It's really conducive to having like interesting characters because your people, I flaked on the term for the things you feel, the motivations,
the values.
Thank you. You know, like there's times where I'm like going to interact. I've done it where I've had a whole, you know, paragraph of text, and then I look at it and I'm like, there's something wrong here, and I'll look at my values. I'm like, oh, I'm not there. And I'll like delete it and like start over because I'm like, no, I want to, you know, to work to this. And it's like everybody's kind of working in that, in those. And of course, you know, then there's the power is able to just blow everything up. I mean, the fact that it's, you know, taking the element of the superhero genre that is collateral damage and building something out of that is just, I think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
And I love it because it's, you know, I love to break down the superhero genre. I always have. You know, it's a genre I've always loved, and then I've also always loved things like Watchmen and The Boys and stuff like that. That just, you know, let's pull this element out and like really focus on it and stuff like that. And this feels like that same degree of like, oh yeah, no, collateral damage. Like, you know, Man of Steel was a bad movie because of the damage that they did to the city. They ruined the city. You know, like that.
But at the same time too, I love the action sequences in that because it's like, well, of course that's what would happen.
That's exactly it. Know? Yeah, I feel the same way.
This is like Smallville's downtown was devastated.
Yeah.
Absolutely devastated. And they're lucky. And, you know, like that was kind of one of the motivating factors behind it of just like, you know, I mean, like, it's a big CG movie, and, and, you want to do the whole Michael Bay thing of stuff blowing up and everything like that. But it's still a PG-13 movie, and it's just like, no, you have to assume that everyone got out okay, because we didn't show people actually hurt and all this other kind of stuff.
Right.
For me, it was just that whole idea of just like, let's take that and let's roll with it.
Yeah.
And then just kind of pit people. It's just like a different way to look at the genre of like the what ifs. What if this? What if that? Go Twilight Zone kind of stuff with it. Like what if superheroes were the bad guys? Kind of thing. Love it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to play it some more. We're doing a play by post. It does play by post really well too.
Yeah, once we got kind of like the turn sequence, so like the as written, it's very much kind of fluid. Everyone just kind of, say what you want to do and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Didn't really quite work for the play by post or play by forum, I think technically is what we're doing. It's on Discord, but yeah. Once we kind of got an initiative sequence down and everything like that, then that sucker is just flowing.
Oh yeah.
And I'm very excited to see how this is all going to go. And that's once again, it's playing on the whole thing. I don't know how it's all going to turn out. I have an idea of what I want to do, and I've got my characters, working behind the scenes and everything else with this. But, I don't know how this is all going to turn out, and I love that fact because I know that the system is going to force it. It's like I could completely drop the ball and get completely caught up in, a certain side story or something like that. But then the mechanics of the game are going to kick in and say, like, okay, everyone's scenes are up. Now we have to have a battle scene. It's got to be a real fight. Sorry, you can't move forward until there's an actual real fight with real risks and everything like that. So what are you going to do? Right. Okay, I got to do this and we got to do this. Like, okay, it's the next act. Now at this point, you got to start answering the questions that were asked in Act 1. You can't proceed until you answer those questions. Okay, gotcha. Like if the system and everything is there to keep you on track, but it just allows you to just kind of sit back and just kind of let it unravel a little bit in front of you.
Yeah.
So, I love it.
It's great. It's a lot of fun. I recommend, I know you said it's not for everybody. I recommend anybody that's a superhero fan and loves the genre and the fiction behind it.
I think everyone wants to buy it. I honestly do.
I think so.
Every single person wants to buy it. I don't necessarily think that you want to play it, but I'm willing to take that risk. If you want to go ahead and just give me the money on the Kickstarter,
sure,
and then you can just check it out. You're gonna lose $10. Worst come to worst, but you know what? It's going towards a good cause.
Right. Listen, if you're listening to this, you've spent $10 on something worse than this. So
that is true.
Yeah,
that is very true. And it's a spend you don't tell anybody about. Like the only people that know were the people who went to Vegas with you, and they know that you dropped $10 on that.
Yeah.
And they looked at you, and things have not been the same ever since.
Yeah, it's been weird.
And you dread getting that phone call from the reason why you spent the $10 that basically remind you and then threaten to tell your wife. Like it's that. You've done worse with $10 than to back Pandora at total destruction. Yeah. And that's how anti-marketing works.
I love it. Well, that's fantastic. Todd Crapper, it's been great having you on. You are welcome back anytime you want to sit in the parking lot and
Well, and we were talking before we hit recording and stuff like this, and we were just talking about, like the change of things, and now's the days of legal weed and stuff like this. I'm very comfortable sitting in back parking lots behind the mall because that's how I used to have to get my weed. So this is my comfort zone. I just miss not being able to see familiar faces.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that convention where we get to sit down and hang out and play a game together.
I'm very much looking forward to that because that is a thing. I very much have been deprived of it, but it's all going to be worth it when the time comes, and we're able to get back to something again.
Absolutely. Everybody, go check out Pandora Total Destruction. It is on Kickstarter right now as you're listening to this. So go check it out and and buy it, and buy a bunch of it, or just donate extra money too. Like that's my suggestion.
And even better, actually, even better than that, or maybe just as good, is to give it a shot. There's a free preview edition that's available through DriveThruRPG, itch.io, and the CDG Marketplace, which is a Canadian online retail outlet that's been set up by my friend Josh. And it's 50 pages. It gives you a summary of how everything works. It gives you enough to be able to create, a PDT character. There's a character sheet that's included, just, to kind of see for yourself, and get a really broad picture of how everything works. And if it so much as like scratches a little itch of, I wonder if that would work, or I wonder if this person would go for it. If there's even so much as like a little bit of a nudge, then I've got you. I've got you hooked. And part of my plan has all come together. And now you're mine.
Fantastic, yes.
And that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Yeah, just, first one's free. Nope, I shouldn't. Too far. Pull back. Thank you so much for coming on the lounge.
No
this
problem.
Has been
Thank you for
real
having
blast.
me.
And you've listened, so you know that I end every show by asking my lounge lizards to stay classy. Would you like to do the honors?
Wait, this is the thing that you do?
Yeah, every show I tell the lounge lizards, my listeners, give them that name by Bo Sheldon, to stay classy. So would you care to do the honors?
So I just tell everybody to stay classy? Yeah. You do realize that I want you to keep in this whole part where I clearly don't understand what you're talking about.
100% do.
Okay. Because this is just kind of improv moment 101 right here. I'll just be like, you want me to what? You want me to tell everybody stay classy?
Yeah, you can use a cool voice if you want to.
But I mean, like, I don't understand everyone's definition of classy. I mean, like, some people don't like to be, some people really like to be crassy, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of let a fart rip and all this other kind of stuff in an enclosed room. I don't want to feel like those people are being excluded in any way. That it's just like, if, sit back with a martini kind of thing. Yeah. But I mean, if this is, like what your lounge, listeners, like, and this is what they do, sure, stay classy, my friends. Is that good? Is it too much? I feel like it's a little much. Should we tone it back a little bit?
Yeah, let's tone it back a little bit.
Let's talk about, you know what? Stay classy. Do whatever you want to do.
That's great.
That's too far down, at this point. Let's go for a nice mid-range.
All right.
Stay classy.
Wonderful. Perfect.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna record some other ones when I get home, and I'll email them to you. And you just pick and choose what you want. You just, perfect. Exactly. Use the Ian McKellen approach, and I'm gonna give you 12 different takes. You pick the one you want.
I love it. Todd is awesome. What a fun conversation. What a fun thing to do. Just interview cool people like that. Go check out Pandora Turtles Destruction. It's on Kickstarter right now. Todd Crapper's stuff is at brokenrulergames.net. His stuff is awesome, folks. Just go do it. It's amazing to be back. It's been a real hard few years, and I've gotten a lot of great support. I can't wait to get to a con to hug every single one of you. Take it away, Kristen.
The Lounge is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs, with lots of great shows like this one. Misdirected Mark. Go live every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to break down and get inside games, game mastering, playing games, and game design in an effort to entertain and inform you. The Lounge theme, And So It Begins by Artificial Music, is used under Creative Commons 3.0. Support Contessa at contessa.rocks. Find your host, Jesse Doc Edmond, at Doc Palindrome on Twitter. All the links from this episode can be found in the episode description.